Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Telos of EV live on YouTube. Hope you're having a better day than Canoo is right now because, ooh, man, I have not seen a company that used to be valued so high actually report cash equivalents at the end of Q3 at $6.8 million. That's all they had left, which is incredibly low. So there's a little bit of good news, but mostly pretty scary stuff for Canoo. Just to be clear, I'm for them. I want them to succeed. I genuinely hope they can hit the market as soon as possible. But the good news is they did announce a start of production date. So this appears pretty locked in for November 17th, which is 8 days from now, basically means next week. However, they clarified on the earnings call, Tony, the CEO of Canoo, basically stated that they're only going to build like 15 vehicles, even though they're considering that start of production for this year. But I guess it is like to me, it feels like they're reaching a bit here by claiming that technically production started at the end of 2022. You know, on the website, the lifestyle vehicle is still listed as launching in late 2022. Um, so they're based out of Oklahoma City, but I'm guessing that this first wave of production, that's very small numbers, is mainly to calibrate and make sure the factory equipment works. But they claim that this counts as official start of production because the vehicles that they're building are going to be delivered to their fleet buyers, which includes Walmart. So that's what I guess, if you're just glancing at headlines, is the good news, is that there's another EV startup that's going to start production and technically start delivering vehicles to a client. If you just read the surface of that, it sounds good. And they definitely secured a lot of fleet orders from both King Bee and Zeba. Lots of people willing to put down binding orders with options to add 11,000 units, 12,000. They've got plenty of demand, so that's not Canoo's problem. Unlike Lucid, who I think is slowly starting to realize that they need to lower prices or change the product strategy quite a bit. But in the third quarter, they did. Here's what surprised me. They said on this call that they completed 118 Gamma builds. So non like consumer ready models, they built over 100. Production is starting next week, but they're only going to build 15 before the end of the year, which means like one vehicle every 3 days or something like that. Not that many. Canoo production already beginning next week. I've not been up to date with news on them. To be honest, it sounds a lot better than it is. Looking at their financials, they had under $7 million at the end of Q3, which essentially means that all of their operating expenses are being paid for through debt, through equity lines, or through liquidating the stock, which is why the Go EV stock has taken such a hard hit over the past few months, is because the company basically is selling their own shares to help keep themselves afloat. So I'm not a financial expert here, but it's safe to say that their cash on hand is insanely low. Like, they are inches away from bankruptcy. But at the same time, they announced some pretty decent news, which is that they are acquiring a delivery center, a vehicle manufacturing facility in Oklahoma City. So it's strategically located. They said it's close to major highways and rail, so they can move in materials and supplies straight from by train, which is a fraction of the price for semi trucks. That's something a lot of people were hoping for with Lucid, that they were going to announce on the next earnings call. They were like, we really hope Lucid is able to access some rail line to help reduce cost of transporting supplies, but they didn't have that. But Canoo did. Canoo kind of took that thunder from them, which was kind of surprising. But they've shifted strategy so many times. You know, I remember first following Canoo, they wanted to do a subscription model and they didn't want to sell vehicles. They changed CEOs, they changed more board members, and then they decided, okay, actually, we are going to sell vehicles and we're going to start with the lifestyle vehicle. Then they shifted again to, actually, we're going to come up with a delivery van version of the lifestyle vehicle. So it looks very similar, drives pretty much the same, but it's not a vehicle that is really intended to be bought by everyday consumers. It's just like 2 seats in the front and a bunch of cargo area in the back, and that's who's interested in it. Walmart for last mile delivery, and basically companies that need small, energy efficient vehicles that are good at transporting goods. Um, so that seems to be their main focus right now. Like as soon as you go to Canoo's website, that's the first thing that they show off is the delivery lifestyle vehicle. Not to be confused with the multi-purpose delivery van, which is a different thing. That's a larger vehicle that they've come up with that is also meant to be used by, shipping carrier services and to deliver products to people with last mile delivery. But they're racking up a lot of debt. I'm honestly somewhat impressed that they're getting so many companies to sign on, because their report was their highlight was that they got over $2 billion in potential revenue signed from contracts, and that their vehicles currently are sold out for everything they can build until the end of 2024. Now, that makes it sound like they have a tremendous backlog, but if you do some backwards math, they say that's about $2 billion on the order book and $750 million binding, which means that as long as they're able to build them, the companies that signed the contract have to take delivery. They have to pay for them for whatever that fleet order price is, but they can't back out of that $750 million. But it says they have a clear path to secure funding, and that they're evaluating non-dilutive capital sources on a $500 million asset appraisal. So it's not a great financial situation for the company to be in, to be racking up so much debt and not have that much revenue on the way. But essentially, they're starting very low volume production next week, insanely low volume. I would argue that this should not even be considered production, but they are considering it that, just because they say that the vehicles they're going to start building next week are going to be delivered to customers like Walmart and used, and they will be operational at that point. But they're not delivering vehicles, I think, to individual consumers yet. I think everything is prioritizing the fleet orders, which means that we may not get EPA documents, and we're not probably going to get any customer impressions videos of I just took delivery of my Canoo, here's what I think. We're probably not going to get that. I'm just praying, dear God, don't let Canoo go out of business, because I mean, there's a lot of EV brands I like, and there's definitely a lot of redundancy in the EV space with a lot of companies that have same old electric crossover, yada, yada, yada. It's a 5-seater. It has decent range, decent charging speed. Canoo is trying to be very unique and original with their designs, and hoping to have an original approach that enables certain capability that you wouldn't have, whether it be the steer-by-wire enabling for better legroom and better visibility on the front. That's why Canoo's vehicles look so weird. Or having a open back so that you can fit 7 people in a fairly compact vehicle. Something that's fairly modular and easy to transfer between lifestyle vehicles and delivery vehicles and even adventure vehicles, and easily converted into a pickup truck style vehicle. So I get the intention, and I like the designs. I just think that they didn't have that much of a clear focus, and they've changed paths and changed strategy so many times. And I'm sure that's partly because of the CEO and Canoo's board changing so many high-end staff so many times. You got so many cooks in the kitchen, essentially. So I'm happy that the production is technically starting, and that they have secured this next facility that I guess they have all of the equipment needed. And they said that in the first half of next year, they're going to move all of their manufacturing equipment into this new facility that will employ over 500 people. And that is the facility that they just acquired in Oklahoma City. That's the one that they're going to use for high volume production. And they're targeting, take it all with a grain of salt, because they've delayed deliveries several years in a row now. They're targeting 20,000 vehicles produced next year. They're saying they're only going to do 15 this year, so that's quite an insane jump. But yeah, pretty sketch that they're basically living on the stock and liquidating shares in order to keep the lights on. Yeah, what were to happen? Well, let's say, what were to happen if owned a Lucid and they shut down completely tomorrow? Would my EV work like normal, just not get any future software updates, or would the tech in the car become irrelevant? I'm pretty sure the software that your car currently has, it will just continue to have. It's not like if the company goes under, your car just won't turn on anymore. The bigger problem with that is software support. So if there is a bug in your vehicle with its current software version and the company went under, that bug could not go away. Basically, you would have that bug for the life of the car, which would be quite problematic. So it's not a good thing, but the vehicle would still work, assuming you can charge it and stuff. And I don't even think Electrify America technically needs that kind of upkeep, so you probably could keep charging it at EA. 4680 Model Y in 2023 coming up. Yeah, Tesla. I saw the Teslarati article about that. They claim that there's a new 4680 Model Y that's been filed with the EPA, but I always thought if you were filing with the EPA, that had to be public, and it's not public yet. So they don't disclose the range or the efficiency. I don't know where Teslarati got their sources from, but they claim that there's a 4680 Model Y 2023 variant coming, but we know literally nothing about it, other than Teslarati claims that they know about it. But nothing references it on the EPA website. They didn't say what the range is. We don't know if it's the exact same model that they sold before that kind of has gone quiet, but yeah. If I owned a Lucid, I want a company to buy out Lucid. If it was Tesla, that would be very interesting. Yeah, I mean, Tesla has no motivation, no reason to buy out Lucid because I don't think Lucid has anything that's worth something to Tesla. Anything Tesla wanted that Lucid has, I mean, I can't honestly think of anything that Tesla would want that Lucid has. I guess more efficient powertrain, but that's not a mystery. Tesla knows how to build more efficient powertrains. They just aren't focused on that right now because that's not the limiting factor with EV adoption. They're focused on things that no one has, like full self-driving or maximizing battery supply, which Lucid definitely is not maximizing. Tesla uses way more 2170 cells than Lucid does. So yeah, I just don't think there's anything of value that Lucid has to offer. But yeah, buyouts I think are more likely than just total bankruptcies at this point. I feel like there's enough value in these startups, especially ones like Lucid that have built vehicles, delivered them to customers, and people are, actually driving around with the product. To me, that implies, okay, there's a fan base of passionate people, and there's products and in a factory line that's built to assemble those products that people want. So the idea that they would just shut down and no one would come in, because the thing is they would have to liquidate so much stock and drive the valuation so absurdly low that it would be like, it's just easier. Like, if it was so cheap, anybody could scoop them up. I mean, Amazon could scoop them up, or Microsoft, or Apple, or really anybody, Walmart or something. Walmart will buy Lucid. But yeah, if they get so insanely cheap and they know that there's manufacturing equipment in place to build vehicles that people want, then I think it's more likely for them to get acquired than it would completely shut down. Let's see. Edgar says, you know how we have large truck stops? Do you think there will be something similar with megachargers once there are way more semis on the road? I suppose so. That would probably be a good place to start if you were just trying to build out new megachargers. But from what I can tell, the big difference between electric semi-trucks and diesel semi-trucks is that typically the places that the semi-trucks are loading and unloading are parked at fairly large factories or warehouses or grocery stores that have access to fairly high voltage electrical equipment anyway. So you can install not mega charger, but a pretty fast charger there. And that's what they pitched when they first unveiled the Tesla Semi, was that it would charge while you're loading and unloading. You don't really do that with diesel semis. You don't really store a bunch of diesel fuel at the semi-truck loading dock or loading bay. So, not to say that there won't be mega chargers on routes at truck stops and stuff, but I just feel like there doesn't need to be as many as we have for diesel because, again, they can just charge when they're at their destination or waiting to leave their destination. That's probably going to be cheaper, and Tesla appears to be working with the people that have reserved the Semi and said, okay, Frito-Lay, they're going to buy some semis. So because they're buying our first batch, let's install mega chargers at their facility. That way they can charge and be topped off as they're being used. So that makes a lot of sense in my view. If Tesla went out of business tomorrow, what would you do with your Model 3? Keep since they'll be more rare, or sell and simply move on to another brand? No, of course I would keep it. Right now, there's nothing really that massively wrong with it. I would be very sad. I don't even think it's possible that Tesla could go out of business tomorrow. But um, if they did, yeah, I would just keep driving the car. I guess the supercharging network might get worse and worse over time if Tesla wasn't there to maintain it. But yeah, Tesla would get bought out way before they went out of business. Um, let's say Lucid starts delivering at high volume. If Apple then bought Lucid and implemented their software natively mixed with the premium build, how much would that entice you? Not much. I'm not a huge fan of the Lucid design or price point. Um, the interior design is just not my preference. I'm okay if you like it. That's good for you. But there's no amount of software that would make me prefer having the big, giant, curved display behind the wheel and then this little tablet display beneath that. And, it has a CCS connector, not the Tesla connector, which I'm not as big a fan of. The trunk is quite narrow. And again, it just like costs 3 times the price of my Model 3. And aesthetically, I'm just not as into it. So it wouldn't really entice me, but it would be fascinating to watch. I would love to see Apple get more serious in the EV space rather than just dabble with CarPlay updates here and there. Um, Mike says, Canoo to the moon. 15 vehicles closer is still something, even if you stacked 86.5 million LVs end to end. I guess it's better than nothing. Some start of production is, it's, in my opinion, it should barely be considered production, but it feels like the R&D, like the prototype team is selling their prototypes. If you're only building 15 vehicles within like a month and a half, is that really production, or are you just selling your Gamma editions? That's what it feels like. But who do you think is Tesla's biggest EV competitor in the future once all these companies start catching up? I don't really see anyone catching up. I see other companies entering the market, but no one is really close to Tesla in volume or profitability per vehicle. Tesla on average made something like $9,000 per car, and that's like 8 times that of Toyota. Despite Toyota delivering more cars, they're losing a lot more money on them or profiting very little on them. So that's why I feel like it's not like Tesla has ramped and now they're steady, now they're stable, and everybody else is catching up to where Tesla is flatlining. Tesla is still growing at an insane rate. They're building factories faster than everybody else, and they're investing in battery ramping faster than everybody else. Expanding Giga Shanghai, growing Giga Texas, Giga Berlin. I just don't see other EV brands of any kind, legacy or startup, that are ramping as quickly as Tesla is. So it's not like Tesla has ramped and now they're steady. It's like Tesla is still growing like this and everybody else is starting to grow, but it doesn't mean that they're close. So Tesla's biggest competitor, probably, if I had to pick an EV brand, I would say someone in China, like Neo or Xpeng, but I've heard they've had demand issues since Tesla slashed prices. They were starting to get off the ground, and then Giga Shanghai finally caught up on their demand. They were building enough vehicles to match demand because they were at like an all-time high. And then they were like, okay, let's cut prices now because we can afford it. And then Xpeng and Neo, allegedly, I'm not sure if that was confirmed or not, but they reported a big cancellation. A bunch of people backed out on those non-brands, those non-Tesla brands. And that resulted in Tesla getting another huge wave in demand. Most likely publicity and financial reasons for selling 15 lifestyle vehicles this year. Yeah, I think it is. So they can technically check that box. They see, we're in production, technically. But Tesla's biggest competitor, I would say, they don't really have one. Because there's no one at their scale. And no one, even if you were at their scale, it would probably be a different demographic. And whoever's getting close to their scale is not selling as profitably. So their biggest enemy, I guess, is tradition. That, like, people who still want to drive gas cars who don't want to drive EVs at all. Maybe, I don't know. There's not much of a competitor to Tesla in my view. How competitive do you think the upcoming 2023 BMW i7 EV will be against the Model S? Well, considering it's $150,000, not that competitive. I feel like it's catering to a completely different audience. They are technically both luxury EV sedans, but Tesla still can't build Model S's fast enough, so they can afford to miss out on some orders. But I don't know. I feel like the Model S and X they're not like traditional luxury EVs. Like, yes, they technically, some people would describe them as luxury just because they're expensive and they have features that are above and beyond what standard vehicles have. But I still feel like the Model S and X are for people that are overly techy. They really like software and they really like tech in their cars. And you just want to take that Tesla experience like above and beyond. Like, if Tesla didn't have to worry about how much the vehicle cost, you would get something like the Model S and X. And whereas the BMW i7, I feel like, is more catering towards, again, that like more luxurious, here's what the EV version of a legacy automaker would make. It's cool. I was watching a couple videos on it, but it's I don't think it's going to take anything away from the Model S. It's just like Tesla has it's like the enthusiast tier, right? It's like that you really, really love Tesla, so you buy a Model S or X. Because that's what it really gives you. It's the Tesla experience enhanced. It's a bigger display and no gear stocks and more capacitive buttons and more emphasis on software and, ventilated seats. And it just takes what Tesla is known for and pushes it a little further at a higher price. Here's some more range. Here's some more performance. Whereas BMW i7 is just, here's an electric version of our previous, luxury models. How competitive do you think the upcoming... Oh, I just read that, sorry. What would it take for someone to overthrow Tesla as the top dog? Is it just a native charging network because Tesla aren't the cheapest but still sell more? I think it's production capacity. That's why Tesla's the top dog, is because they sell more than everybody else. And that's a combination of, yes, they've made vehicles that are very high in demand. That's what I'm sitting in right now. But it's also because Tesla focused on production efficiency above all else, and they got that right way early on, way before everybody else did. And I still feel like even the legacy automakers that are ramping things like the Ioniq 5, the EV6, the ID4, they still don't have the same emphasis on production efficiency that Tesla does. They're not using as many gigapresses. They're not streamlining the interior design or reducing parts, reducing complexity whenever they can. Tesla reduces parts and complexity, as we would say, to a fault. A lot of people are like angry and mad that Tesla dropped the ultrasonic sensors and dropped sonar from the car, because we're like, hey, you shouldn't rely just on cameras and the occupancy network isn't going to be good enough. But it doesn't matter what we think. Tesla knows people will keep buying the product, so they dropped that. And now they're saving, I think Monroe said it's like $114 per car by not having to include that wiring anymore. Probably simplifies manufacturing a lot more to not have to have all those holes and excess wiring on the bumpers and stuff. So we argue that it makes the product worse, but that's, I think, what separates Tesla from everybody else, is that they will compromise on the user experience, or they will delay a feature, or they will make the product worse if it means that they can make it faster. And I don't see that as much in legacy auto. It happens occasionally, but for the most part, Tesla's the kind of company that would be like, yeah, we're going to drop passenger lumbar support, or we don't need a glove box latch, or they just leave out little basic. We don't even have oh shoot handles, right? Or I call them accessibility handles up here. We don't have that because it helps us streamline production, which means, for one, it ticks off a lot of people, and that's why many say, yeah, Tesla's not for me. I don't like that overemphasis on simplicity and minimalism. It goes too far for some. But you can argue all day what your personal preference is, but ultimately Tesla knows that if we side on the market of simplicity and minimalistic interior and minimalistic design, that will pay off, because it means that we have the thickest margins. That's why Tesla has so much cash in the bank and so little debt. compared to everybody else who tends to have tons of debt and not very much cash in the bank, which means if needed, right now they don't need to, but if needed, Tesla could easily increase demand by lowering prices a lot. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think Tesla could undercut basically everybody if they needed to. If Elon just gets crazier and crazier and nobody wants to buy Teslas anymore because of Elon, or because competition has got better features, or competition has sonar sensors or oh shoot handles, and everybody stops buying Teslas, then they would lower prices until they got people buying them again. And because Teslas, I think, are really, really cheap to build because of their manufacturing efficiency, I think they could undercut basically every EV on the market right now, and have the great supercharging access and all that. But I do think the native charging network helps, but the problem is Tesla's already established there. They already have tens of thousands of superchargers deployed, and no one at this rate is deploying superchargers, or no one at this rate is deploying level 3 fast chargers faster than Tesla. And even if there was someone deploying fast chargers twice as fast as Tesla was, it would take years for them to catch up to the size of the supercharger network, because it's already here. It already exists, and Tesla's not stopping. So this is why I have a lot of faith in them as a company, and why I personally think Tesla will become the largest company on earth, is because they have such an insane lead that's nearly impossible unless they just had. I would say, to answer your question, Hasael, about what would it take for someone to overthrow Tesla, it's not about what someone else would do. It would have to be very, very poor decision making by Tesla. I don't know what would cause it. Maybe if Elon just gets so obsessed with Twitter that he decides to sell, like, I don't know, all of his stock, which he's selling right now, by the way, really hurts the company, or leaves it, or puts someone who's not very competent in charge of the company, and they start wasting time on projects that go nowhere. They start blowing money on things that go nowhere. If Tesla makes a lot of really, really bad decisions that financially impedes them from growing or expanding or turning a profit, then someone else could catch up just by staying the course. Slow and steady wins the race. But I don't see that happening, because you'd have to make some really, really poor decisions to get Tesla to a point of we're out of money, or we're bankrupt, or we can't afford to keep doing this, or we can't afford to expand or keep our factories running. They've positioned themselves in such a unique place, in such a position of power, that it's like, yeah, I have a very hard time believing. There are a few pics floating around with Walmart Canoo vehicles. Yeah, I think I saw them. I've also been seeing a lot of videos and pictures of the Canoo pickup truck. I think Tony, the CEO, is driving one around or something. But yeah, I'm really hopeful for Canoo, because I think they got a fantastic product, and I would love to see. Ultimately, I think they probably should have started with the pickup truck, because those are so high in demand. It's like, it doesn't matter what the specs are. It doesn't matter how many you can build. If you build an electric pickup truck, people will pay tons of money for it, really, regardless of the range or specs. There is not any electric pickup truck on the market right now that someone will not buy, just because they're so high in demand. But I guess that's not really Canoo's issue, right? They've got tons of fleet buyers. I don't know what they're selling those fleet vehicles for to Walmart, and other companies and stuff are locking in orders for them. But yeah, the demand's not their issue. But I just felt like if they started with a pickup truck, they could probably sell it at a higher margin. The lifestyle delivery vehicle that they're starting with in fleet deliveries, they say on the website the lifestyle vehicle starts around $39,000. So I would assume that if you're buying them in bulk, Walmart and different companies, I always forget the name of these other companies. I don't know them as well. There's other brands that have locked in binding contracts with Canoo. Yeah, King Bee. Oh, the U.S. Army ordered some. NASA ordered some. Zeba ordered some. There's a lot of different companies that have locked in these orders for them. But when you're buying in bulk, I bet they're selling them for, close to that, $40,000 or $45,000. I'm sure at the early stage of ramp up, it costs more than that to build. But if you would have just started with the delivery truck variant, even if the range is only 200 miles, you could have sold all of them for $70,000 easily, because that undercuts every Rivian right now, almost every F-150 Lightning. And because Canoo is not really doing the dealership model, I feel like they would probably undercut most of the F-150 Lightnings, and it's like almost a totally different pickup truck market because of the difference in design, and people buying the Lightning are just, they like Ford, they like the F-150, that's what they want. So they probably could have sold at higher margin if they started with the truck, but it's too late for that. I guess all of their manufacturing lines are optimized for the lifestyle vehicle. Let's see. What's your take on the rate of adoption by consumers of EVs versus the infrastructure of charging stations? Will there be a bottleneck that the infrastructure can't keep up? Not really, because I don't think most charging is done via level 3. I have supercharged this car 2 days out of the 2.5 months that I've owned it, because most charging will be done from home. And it will be incentivized for people to charge during off-peak hours. So this has been researched thoroughly many, many times. It's not like people don't know about this, but the grid can handle a lot of electricity. The problem is when a lot of electricity is all being consumed at the same time. You notice that we have rolling blackouts during heat waves. That's not a coincidence. The circumstances that arise that result in the rolling blackouts, or California issuing warnings to everyone saying turn off your AC or set your thermostats higher, is because when everybody is maxing out their HVAC system at the same time, that's when the grid gets overloaded and we can't sustain that much power consumption. They don't tell you to do that like late at night, because when it's nighttime, it's cooler. People aren't running the HVAC as heavy, so the grid can support it. So that's when energy consumption is the lowest, is when people go to sleep. And that's when most people charge their devices anyway. Phones, watches, laptops, as they plug it in at bedtime. And I think cars aren't going to be any different. Yes, they are going to consume a lot of electricity compared to what we consume now, but I don't think most people are charging from 0 to 100% overnight. Most people are charging from, a lower state of charge based off of their commute or what they did that day, which could be 40%, it could be 50%. And then overnight, they plug into that till they hit their charge limit, which if you have a nickel-based battery, that's around 80%. If you have an LFP battery, it could be 100%. But you're not full charging every single battery every single night. And utility companies are already motivating people to charge slower overnight because that's when electricity is cheaper. If you're on the EV tier, you get lower rates. You get a cheaper price per kilowatt hour. So that basically means that most people who buy an EV are going to be charging it at home, wherever it's parked, slowly overnight, not at level 3 stations in the middle of the day, which are always going to be more expensive because there's more upkeep, there's more infrastructure, more wiring, more cooling required to get a cable to charge your car at over 100 kilowatts or 200 kilowatts or whatever. So the limiting factor with EVs is not coming close to we're going to overwhelm the grid, because we're not going to switch everyone to EVs overnight. It's a very slow, very gradual process, probably slower than people think. There's like 2 billion cars in operation across the globe, and there's about 60 million to 70 million cars sold globally every year. And we're not anywhere close to every new vehicle being electric. We're still only at I think it's 6% now, or 7% of new cars are electric, and that grows. Yes, there's more and more EVs charging in existence, but it doesn't mean that suddenly we're going to wake up one day and 100% of cars are electric and now the grid can't handle it. The grid is going to have decades to optimize for, okay, there's been an increase in energy consumption during off-peak hours, but again, the grid can handle that as long as it's not everybody blasting their HVAC systems and everybody charging their EV up to 100% at the same time, at the same hour. That's we have peak rates and off-peak rates. So they encourage you to use more electricity during the off-peak rates because the grid can sustain that. So I don't think it's as big an issue as people think it is, because EV adoption is not that fast. Like when they were measuring what the largest consumers of electricity was during the energy crisis this last summer when everybody was running the HVAC at the same time, EVs accounted for like 2% of the electricity usage because there's not, relatively speaking, there's not that many EVs on the road right now. And even as Tesla doubles up on production, even as Rivian and VW and Ford, even as all of them double up on production, we're still going to be a fairly small percentage of total electricity use because not that many people own EVs, but lots of people own air conditioners. And lots of people love to run them when it's hot out, understandably. Um, so it's not the biggest issue in my view. It's something that, like, the reason it's not the biggest issue in my view is because we went from no electricity to like every house having electricity, no question, within a matter of a few decades with across the 20th century, 3 or 4 decades. And then before HVAC was a thing, we were all using a tiny fraction of energy compared to what we use now. So if you're worried about all of these EVs are going to consume a lot more electricity, it's like uh, the HVAC deployment at scale was a much bigger strain on our grid at the time, because back before HVAC systems existed, we didn't think we were going to need, every household was going to consume dozens of kilowatt hours per day. That was not a thought. Everyone was using a fraction of that. But then HVAC became popular and more people started installing them. Everybody started using them during the summers and the world gets hotter. And it's like, oh crap, everybody's using like 10 times, 15 times as much electricity, but the grid accounted for it. And, the deployment of it, it's not like everybody got a central heating and air conditioner at the same time, but it did gradually roll out. They saw a trend and they accounted for it. So I think that's how it's going to work with EVs is, okay, there's an increase in electricity consumption, yes, but we financially motivate people during the off-peak hours to charge at nighttime, and most people are not doing full charge cycles every night. They're just, the average American drives 40 miles a day, and the typical EV would take, 10 kilowatt hours to go. I mean, a fairly efficient EV would take 10 kilowatt hours to go 40 miles. Maybe a less efficient EV would take 12 or 15 kilowatt hours. I guess that's the standard, maybe. And that compared to what we're using with HVAC is not actually that much. It's a lot of people use more than that per day already, just through their current electricity demand. Let's see. Space Waffles says, do you think Tesla will ever use an EV van for its mobile service, moving away from its gas vans? And which EV van would you see them using, unless they make their own, of course, but don't include that? Oh, okay. A different company's EV van. That would be interesting. It would definitely be a big endorsement if they did. If a Canoo was like, hey, we're getting used by Tesla's vehicles, that would put them on the map. And I think a lot of people would get more excited about Canoo. But yeah, I get the feeling that the mobile service vans, they just bought what was quick and cheap and easy. I would like to think that they're going to replace all of their semi trucks that they use for operation with Tesla semis, but it sounds like the first Tesla semi deliveries are going to be for Pepsi, which means that Tesla will have a semi in production, but they won't be using it. They'll still be driving around diesel semis just because there's not enough of them. So I'm guessing it would be based on what was available, and I don't think there's enough electric vans available to kind of match what the Ford Transit vans can match in terms of volume, because Tesla needs all these mobile service vans. So yeah, I don't think they will use another EV brand, just because they probably won't have enough scale for it, and they would probably prefer using their own van. And honestly, I think a lot of mobile service visits can be accomplished just with a Model S or X, an old one. They could just use an old Tesla and they can fit a lot of equipment and parts and stuff. They don't necessarily need a van for every single mobile service vehicle. Let's see. Been in a few, never dawned on me. What's that? Let's see. Do you like the strategy of established brands taking established models like F-150 or Mustang, turning them electric? That way they make their already established fans' eyes interested in electric. I don't love the concept, because I tend to think that if you try to retrofit or put a EV platform into a non-EV vehicle, you get less efficiency, you get less optimization for it. There's advantages. It's not all cons. Like, the F-150 Lightning, I think, was pretty smart because it involved just taking your basic run-of-the-mill F-150 that everybody's seen a million times, and here just happens to be an electric version. So if you are trying to get people to buy EVs, then it's a good move. I just don't really prioritize that, if you're asking my opinion, because you're asking me, do I like that strategy? I'm like, we don't need more people. We don't need to convince people to buy EVs because we can't build enough of them already. So that's why I kind of take fundamental issue with the Hummer EV, which is, I get what the intention is. The Hummer EV is going for that brutalism design. It's trying to convince people that are interested in big, bulky, scary looking vehicles that they can also buy electric vehicles. So it kind of goes against the EV stigma that people have. But I'm like, well, why are we trying to convince more people to buy electric if you can't build enough of them? Like, the biggest problem with EV adoption is not we haven't convinced enough people to buy them. The problem is we don't have enough of them. We can't build them fast enough. And there's a ton of people, I'm sure there's a ton of people in this chat even as well. They want to buy EVs. They're ready to switch to EVs, but they can't afford it because they're too expensive. That's the bigger issue, availability. And that applies to both production capacity and affordability. Those are both roots that go into available. It's like there's not a vehicle of my price range that's available to me. And the quicker you can build EVs, the higher volume you can produce them, the shorter the wait time is, which means the lower you can charge for it, because you don't have to collect a 20%, 30% margin on each vehicle. If you're selling more of them, you can collect a 5% margin and still make a good amount of money because you're selling at higher volume. So I'm like, there's a big group of people that want to buy electric that can't because they can't afford it, or the wait time is too long, or the company can't build enough of them. That's why we have a hard time finding, vehicles. There's still a lot of people struggling to find Kia EV6s in stock because they don't build them quick enough. So I'm like, why are you trying to convince people that aren't interested in EVs to buy EVs when you can't even match the current demand? That's where I take issue with it. But I do acknowledge that Ford got to reuse a lot of the interior components and exterior components. They got to recycle a lot of manufacturing parts to make the Lightning. And that likely helped them get it to market faster. It wasn't really delayed like most EVs are. They were just like, hey, here's the electric truck. It's going to come out next year. Here it is. Deliveries have begun. Boom. And it didn't take them that much time. They got in relatively early in the electric pickup truck space. And that was a very good manufacturing efficiency choice. It probably required a lot less upfront investment, which ideally lets them charge less for the truck, but then the dealers kind of screw that up anyway. So I thought the Mustang Mach-E was a bad move just because it's not a Mustang. Like, it's not, when people think Mustang, they don't think four-door crossover. And I get what they were trying to do. They're like, well, we're trying to make it it's a sporty EV, so because it's sporty, we'll call it a Mustang, but we want it to be popular, so we made it a crossover four-door. And I'm like, okay, I just think the vehicle itself is fine. Just you don't need to call it the Mustang. Just call it the Mach-E. Just call it the Ford Mach-E. That's what I call it. That's what everybody in my personal life calls it. Most people, pretty much everyone I've talked to has agreed, don't call it a Mustang. It's a great car, just don't brand it with the Mustang branding. And I agree with that. I think you'd be better off making designs and products more from the ground up, that are optimized for energy efficiency, that are optimized for batteries. F-150 Lightning is still fairly optimized for an internal combustion engine. And yeah, they still made a good product with the Lightning, but I still think they could have gotten a bit more range, a bit better efficiency if they would have gone with a different design that was not so unaerodynamic. And I know that the Lightning is still technically the most aerodynamic F-150, but that's not saying much. That's kind of like saying the fastest sloth in the world. This sloth is faster than all other sloths. Or this snail, what's the fastest snail in the world? They were still using physical antennas on the Lightning. And I was like, okay, this is such a mess aerodynamic wise, and the mirrors are terrible, and the open bed isn't good for aero either. So it's like, it's not as exciting to me. Like, there's a Ford dealership that I've gone to before to drive the Mach-E, and I'm pretty sure they have a Lightning now. And I keep looking at it when I pass by, and I keep thinking, maybe I should go there and check out the Lightning. But I keep kind of talking myself out of it because I realize, like, I'm not that excited about it. I mean, I'm glad it exists, but I just think about me doing a video on it, and it's just going to be me looking at an F-150, which I've driven F-150s before. I know it, and I'm like, will I have a unique perspective, or will I just go up to it and be like, "Yep, feels like an F-150. I guess it's electric though. That's nice." I just feel like I don't have much to say. Um, but I don't know. Maybe I'll get around to checking it out, seeing if something jumps out at me that's more interesting. Um, Mike says, my wife waits every day for Ford to announce an EV Mustang muscle car. Yeah, I still don't get that word muscle. What does that just mean? It's fast? In that case, are all EVs muscle cars? Tesla is not selling the most cars now, and they likely won't in the future. Hyundai, Genesis, Kia will always outsell Tesla. Not in the EV space. They're outselling in total cars, yes, but in terms of battery capacity, no. Tesla vastly outsells them. And at higher price, which is the funny thing. Model Y costs more than the Ioniq 5, but it still outsells it. Taylosov said Tesla will be the biggest company in the world, not biggest EV maker. Well, eventually all cars are going to be electric, and at that point, I think Tesla will be the biggest. As EVs become more and more widespread, you can afford to have lower margins on them, and because there's less parts, less complexity with them, and Tesla has such an emphasis on manufacturing efficiency, you will eventually be undercutting gas cars, and that's when I think that as Tesla continues to ramp, as they have, they're going to surpass 1 million vehicles delivered this year, and then they're going to continue to double that up with the growing factory lines. Eventually, by the end of the decade, I think they're going to be building 15, 16, maybe close to 20 million vehicles a year. And if you can sell 20 million EVs, that means they're going to be fairly low priced and low cost of ownership compared to gas. It's just going to be dumb to buy a gas car at a certain point. I don't personally believe that we need governments to ban gas cars because I think it won't matter. Like, if you're still buying a gas car by 2035, you're basically going to be shooting yourself in the foot. It's like, could you? Yes, but why? Like, what's the advantage of it by then? When the charging networks are going to be so much more built out, the range is going to be much better, charging speed's going to be improved, cost is going to be so drastically low. You're going to be stupid to buy a gas car at that point. But no, I was specifically referring to the biggest company by valuation. Which they're not that far. Right now, Tesla does make the most EVs in the world. Correct. And they're also not that far away. I mean, yes, their stock, everything's down today. What are they at currently? They're at a market cap of 590 billion, but flashback a couple years, they were over $1 trillion, and the biggest company in the world by valuation is 2.7 trillion. So the concept that Tesla will grow their valuation by 2x or 3x within the next decade isn't that big a stretch considering how much they've grown in the past 10 years. So that's why, yeah, that's what I meant by they'll be the biggest company. Not necessarily Hyundai will outsell them in vehicles delivered. It's like, no, the EV business is a more profitable one. Let's see. What is this hideous looking thing in the thumbnail? The Canoo! It's a delivery vehicle. It's not hideous. Be nice. It's just a donkey. I should have rephrased, wasn't necessarily talking about taxing the power grid, more the wait times at charging stations. There are a lot of people that live in apartment complexes and such. There are, but you park your car somewhere when you go to sleep. And that's what we talked about this last week. It will always be financially cheaper to set up level 1 and level 2 chargers wherever you park your car when you go to bed than it will be to build out dedicated level 3 stations for everybody. But it can be done. Like we used as a example last week, Mike never home charged his Model Y for like 2 years. The first 2 years he owned it, he always just took it to a supercharger. Takes a little bit longer than a gas station, but the car is fun to be in. You got a big old TV in here. You can watch YouTube, watch Netflix, watch Disney, do whatever you want. People act like, oh my God, the wait time is so much longer to charge an EV. It's really not that bad. So I don't think, well, every time I've looked it up, the vast majority of people still live in homes compared to apartments. I know that there's a lot of people that are listed as more people live in cities, but the jurisdiction that it does not mean everybody in the city lives in an apartment. There's a lot of suburban areas, a lot of people that, again, wherever you park your car, that's gonna be the most cost effective way to charge it, because level 1, level 2 chargers are very cheap to install. I've already been to many places where it's an apartment complex, but the parking garage is where you park your car for the night, and there's chargers in there. Like my great uncle lives in a apartment complex, and he bought a old Model S, and there's several charging stalls in the parking garage, and they have a couple right now because EVs are not the majority. But as time grows and more people that are buying EVs live in apartment places, they'll start to pay more for apartment places that already have home charging, because that can save them time, or home charging, garage charging. And because it's not that complicated, or that, I mean, apartment buildings already have to have big uh, panel, what's it called? Breaker circuits anyway. They have to have large amounts of electricity going to the building. Tapping into those panels and adding a few level 2 chargers to them, or charging your tenants and saying, you can have free charging at my apartment, but it'll cost you this much a month. So if you drive a certain amount, people, I don't think that the future is just level 3 chargers as plentiful as gas stations. I think that's always going to cost more, and it's going to be better for road trips, and it's worse for your battery than just charging it wherever it's parked. Um, let's see. Please find out about the F-150 Lightning one way or another. That is a point of a test drive. I kind of don't like driving big trucks. I've done it before. Maybe at some point. Junction boxes. Thank you, Mike. That's the word I was thinking of. It's not that complicated to get a big apartment complex. Where do you park your car? Are you parking it in the middle of the street, so far away from a power cable? Then it's kind of impractical to own one at that point anyway. But there's even charge stations on the side of the road now. Where was I? I was in Redmond or something. I was taking the Amtrak across the country, and at the train station I was at a city, and they just had on-street parking that had charging stalls. They're not fast, but if your car is parked there overnight, you can just plug in, and there's electricity running everywhere, people. Basically anywhere there's a light bulb, you can charge an EV with some additional hardware, but the slower charging equipment is much, much cheaper. Did you watch MKBHD's video on the original Roadster? I was really surprised to see how well the battery aged, considering how old it is. Yes, I did. That was interesting. You can tell that they were in their early days on that video. They definitely... the Roadster does not feel like what people think of when they think Tesla. I mean, the outside, yes, is fairly Tesla-esque, but the inside feels very traditional car. Whereas the original 2012 Model S, that is, I think, their first real car. The Roadster was like this freak science experiment that went horribly wrong. I mean, it's a cool car, but Elon admitted many times it made no sense to reuse the Lotus design, because they had to redesign something like 92% of the parts that went into the Lotus. So an incredibly small amount of components were shared with the Roadster, and he said it would have been much easier if they just started design from scratch. And they had all these problems in the development of it and mass production of it. And yeah, in interviews he talks about it not very highly, even though it's an important chapter of their history. It is technically where it all started, but I feel like the Model S is truly their first car, whereas the Roadster was like a messed up science project. Jordan says salvage Teslas will finally be able to use superchargers again, according to Electric. I saw that. It's not the first time I've heard it, though. There's been multiple circumstances where people have said, oh, they're bringing back supercharging to salvage vehicles, and then they don't, or they bring it back for a week and then they take it away again. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up about that, but it definitely would improve a lot of the like resale value of vehicles, because there's a lot of salvage title Teslas that still work fine, and it sucks that they just kind of write off anything that's a salvage title. This can no longer supercharge. That's definitely annoying. I get why they do it, because they're being extra overly cautious towards any vehicle that, like, you pumping 170 or 250 kilowatts into a battery pack is honestly we make it seem like a simple thing. That's the beauty of Tesla, is their supercharger network has made it seem like not that big a deal. You know, you just drive up to the station and yeah, you just plug the cable in and it does the work. We don't think of it as that big a deal. The truth is, there's a lot that could go wrong, and it is potentially very, very dangerous if all the wiring or cooling of the battery pack is not handled properly. So, because Tesla doesn't want to take the time or put in the money to investigating just what happens, uh, inspecting like every single vehicle that's been in an accident or has been salvaged, is it okay? Can it handle that charge rate? So they just say, if it's salvage title, just don't try. Don't even bother. Just not a great long-term solution, but in the short term, it's probably a lot easier for them than trying to inspect every single one, because there are repairs done by them and not by them. So I get why they do it, but yeah, it's just that there's a lot of people that know what they're doing and know how to repair EVs, and there's a lot of people that don't. And things could go really, really wrong if someone who didn't know what they were doing tried to repair a salvage Tesla and then just started supercharging at 250 kilowatts. And, you know, that can cause fires that don't go out very easily. That could spread and hurt people, or, you know, of course, ruin the supercharger. So they're probably monitoring it very, very closely. And if like one salvage Tesla supercharges and catches on fire, then they're probably going to turn it all off again. So it's kind of amazing how much value they have over that demographic of Teslas. Just like without question, they can just make them all not be able to supercharge, and that severely diminishes the resale value, or what someone is willing to pay. If you try to sell someone a Tesla that can't supercharge, they knock down the price quite a substantial amount, no question. That's one of the biggest reasons people want to buy Teslas, is that charger network. What are my thoughts on the Dodge Charger EV muscle car? Yeah, I think it's a joke. I don't really understand the term muscle car associated with EV, and I hate the whole. I like cars to be quiet. I don't like cars that make noise. It's one thing if it's at like a NASCAR track, or I don't know, like a drag race, and you want to hear the engine rev up and get loud. Okay, that's one thing. But most of the time, people are revving up engines really loud in neighborhoods, residential areas, a lot of the time late at night or in busy places, and people can't hear themselves speak because some idiot is revving up their engine. It's like, I think it is abused far often than it is used in the proper circumstance, which is why I don't, I'm not a fan. I would rather those again, I would rather the limited number of batteries we have now go towards the people that actually want EVs, instead of trying to convince people to buy EVs that don't want to. That's what the Hummer, that's what the Charger EV, that's what, to a certain extent, the F-150 Lightning feels like. It feels like trying to convince people who wouldn't buy electric to go electric. Apartment complex don't have a large junction box. I know personally, and it's not simple, not cheap. It would increase rent between a rock and a hard place. Well, I'm not saying it's cheap. I'm saying it's cheaper than mass deploying level 3 chargers everywhere. And I'm saying they're already doing it. Of course, it would increase the rent, but it would decrease the tenant's gas bill. So if you don't have to pay as much for gas, but you found an apartment that lets you charge at the parking garage there, you're going to pay it. Again, I'm not saying it's free and doesn't cost anything. I'm just saying it's cheaper than expecting Tesla or Electrify America to build out a huge number of level 3 chargers, and you're just going to have to manually fast charge your car every time. That's not going to be cheaper for you either, because fast charging electricity is always going to cost more than slow charging electricity. If you go to a level 3 station, that's going to charge you much higher price per kilowatt hour typically than what you can get during off-peak hours or through your tenant. And I don't think all apartment complexes are the same. You might have an apartment complex that doesn't have a large junction box, but the point is there's a bunch of people living in a building that you have to route a bunch of power to. So the idea, if I can install on my super old house that was built during World War II, if I can install a 50 amp breaker and charge my EV here, then I think an apartment building can afford to at least install some level 1 chargers. Maybe they don't charge at 50 amps, but they would give you enough to get through the day. Um, you could say I'm wrong. That's fine. We may just disagree on that, but I think time will prove me right. But again, like a lot of people obsess over the what about people who live in apartments thing. Again, we're not anywhere close to EVs having a demand problem. Lucid is, but they're not much of the EV market. We still have wait times. We still have people that are waiting on their EVs or trying to get them, but they can't build them fast enough. So it's okay if we have to wait 5 or 10 years before, okay, everybody who can charge comfortably from home has now bought an EV. Now the only people that haven't bought an EV are people that live in apartments or people that love gasoline so much they're not willing to buy electric. Okay, that's when we can start working on, let's make some EVs that are appealing to the gas engine community, either by making them feel like a muscle car or making them feel like their old car or offering charger installations at more apartment complexes and stuff. Then we can focus on that. But again, it's not the limiting factor. So that's why I'm not worried about it. That's we're so far away from that becoming a problem. Okay. Hasael says, what's your biggest disappointment with your Tesla? Maybe it's a feature that you expected more out of, or just in general you thought would be cooler before actually owning and experiencing yourself. Basically all of the paid autopilot features. Got to be careful how I phrase that. I really like free autopilot. That did great on my last road trip. Just the included version of autopilot. There was no phantom braking. It didn't slow down for yellow flashing lights. It makes occasional mistakes, but for the most part, just the lane keep of cruise control, staying between the lines is pretty good. But we bought full self-driving for a month. We had Navigate on autopilot. We had Auto Park. We had Summon, Auto Lane Change, Smart Summon, and all that. And Summon was probably the coolest part just because I find it very exciting / inspiring anytime you see a car driving around with no one inside it. That presented more of a wow factor to my friends and family that were checking out the car whenever they were like, oh, what does it do? I heard you got a Tesla. Show us what it's capable of. The Summon feature always amazed people. They loved that because it would steer itself. The tires would be going every which way, and you could see the steering wheel moving back and forth. And you can use Smart Summon with someone in the car. So I'd be like pranking people. They would sit in the passenger seat. They'd be sitting in the back and waiting. And then I would turn on Smart Summon and the car starts driving. And they're like, what? Oh my God. Like, that always blows people's minds. Navigate on autopilot, not that much. Because I still have to keep my hands on the wheel. And I'll let go for a second and be like, see, look, it's doing that. And they're always like, okay, yeah, but you got to take over. You got to grab it. Or, it's not as exciting to people that it can stay between the lines and slow down for the car in front of it. But we did the big San Diego road trip with Navigate on autopilot, and there was tons of phantom braking, which made the car experience really stressful because you'd just be relaxing and driving and everything's fine, and then suddenly it just slams on the brakes, nothing around, no reason to slow down at all. There's nothing in the road. There's no one cutting you off. It's just pure empty roadway. You're cruising at a safe speed. Sunny, there's no rain, and just all of a sudden boom, slows down from like 70 to 55 within a second, and everyone in the car gets uncomfortable. Everyone wakes up and it's like, oh God, what happened? What did you do? And it's like, not me, it was the car. So that was a huge disappointment because it happened like I think a total of 8 times over the course of 1,200 miles. And it really made me paranoid because when I was on autopilot, I had to constantly be like, please don't do that again. Please don't do that again. And I would get relaxed and comfortable, and then it would happen again. And it's hard to describe. The lane changing when I tell it to change is pretty good. So if you're just on autopilot and you're in between the lines, turn on the blinker and then it changes lanes for you after you asked it to. I like that feature. That's nice. But when the car is suggesting lane changes, or I tried every single tier, either the car makes lane changes automatically, or it suggests lane changes and then you have to confirm the lane change. Any of those features, it never worked very well because it doesn't have much strategy involved. It doesn't realize there's a semi-truck in the right lane. It's going very slow. You don't want to get in the right lane because you're just going to have to get out of it again. Or there were several times on the road trip where, okay, we're behind a semi-truck. time to get over, and it waits and it waits, and then it finally decides to get over right as someone is screaming by in the left lane and it's cutting them off. It just doesn't have much wisdom, is the word I describe. It's not wise with its lane changes. It's very basic computer program, like, this car's slow, lane change now. It's not thinking like, oh, someone's coming, I probably shouldn't, I should wait till they pass and then change, or I could get over in the right lane, but there's a semi truck up there that's going really slow. I don't want to get stuck behind him, so I should stay in the left lane. So I found myself constantly having to cancel, like, ignore, like, don't follow that lane change. I just didn't find it very helpful. So that was something that I was excited for with the car that ended up being kind of just a big annoyance. Is like, you told me this was supposed to make road tripping more relaxing and easier, and it ended up being pretty stressful because I'm worried about the phantom braking, and the lane changes were not very wise or made me nervous. So I ended up just using basic autopilot most of the time. Or it would be routing to a supercharger and it would change its mind. Actually, we want to go here. Actually, we want to go here. Actually, and it would doon 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 over and over and over again. But this is all old code. I know it's not the same as FSD beta. In the FSD beta is much better, allegedly, but trying to get on the beta was a real big headache. I paid for FSD. I had a safety score that was near perfect. I requested it through the button and then find out, oh, actually you're on too new a software version. Beta's built on the old version, so you can't get it yet. So they fixed that after my subscription expired. Now they're like, okay, now you can be on the public build and get beta. But now we have to decide whether or not we feel like adding people to the beta. Because even if you qualify, sometimes Tesla doesn't feel like adding people. Because they're like, we got enough beta testers. That's fine. We don't feel like adding you. So the whole, like, everything that's paid autonomy features has not been it hasn't really lived up to the hype. But I still believe Tesla has the potential to have the greatest autonomous driving software package because of the full self-driving computer. And I've seen how FSD beta performs, and it definitely does way more than essentially any other car you can buy on the market right now. You know, when people compare FSD beta to Waymo or Cruise, it usually does way better, and you can't even buy Waymo or Cruise. So I'm not interested in ever buying the $15,000 package, but the ability to maybe one day, what I've said on this stream before, is I do believe that maybe at some point during the life of this vehicle, in the next 10, 20 years, however long I own it, there may be a software update that says, okay, if you pay us however much it is a month, whether it's $200, $300 for the month, then you will have level 3 autonomous driving, which means you still have to be in the driver's seat, but you don't have to pay attention. You could use Tesla Theater as the car is in motion. And the self-driving, I don't think we'll get to a point where it's safe enough that it doesn't need any human in the driver's seat and it can be a robotaxi and just drive itself around. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do believe there's a chance we could achieve level 3, which is when, okay, I need you to take over, but I have to give you like a 5-second notice. Where it's like, okay, sometimes FSD beta doesn't do the right thing, but it will just ask for your help when it gets confused. But the number of times it gets confused and needs your involvement will become very, very irregular. Very, very unoften. So you could just go on the freeway, hopefully using FSD beta version 11, which is single stack and so ironed out and so streamlined and so safe that they're like, yeah, you can... we'll do eye tracking. You know, we've got the in-cabin camera up here, and we'll make sure you're awake. We're not going to say you can go to sleep, but as long as you're awake and, you know, willing to, maybe the nags just get much, much lower. You get, like, instead of having to grab the wheel every 30 seconds now, they could just have you grab the wheel every 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So they just say, are you paying attention? Just, you know, grab the wheel, apply a little bit of torque. Okay, I did. Cool. All right, go back to watching your movie. Something like that. I think this car has the potential to do that, but I'm not like counting on it. I didn't buy this car expecting it to do that, and it'll be a disappointment if it never does. But yeah, software has been a big disappointment in terms of the autonomous driving stuff. The mobile app has exceeded my expectations. I love the app. and I love the layout. This is still my favorite approach to a car UI. I have not seen in VW, in Ioniq 5, in the Mach-E, in any other car I've ever checked out. I haven't found a display with a user interface that is as clean and as simple and as intuitive as Tesla's. Rivian is probably the closest, but still not quite as good. Um, and also way more expensive, so I wasn't gonna get a Rivian. So I'm very grateful for the design. I love the outside of the design. I love the inside. I'm a bit disappointed with build quality, but I kind of knew what I was getting into with that. Everybody who bought Teslas was reporting some little weird build quality issues, so I kind of knew that was going to happen, but I wasn't exactly sure what issue I was going to have. Turned out to be the wind noise on the driver window, which I've been to the service center 3 times. They haven't fixed it, so I just kind of accepted it. It's like, okay, yep, that's Tesla. Sometimes you got to put up with that crap. Um, Alternate Reality says, I was driving in heavy rain with traffic at night in LA last night. No phantom braking on basic autopilot, LFP Model 3. That's wonderful. I'm happy to hear the stories that you don't have them, but it doesn't change that it was a bad experience for me and everybody that was in the car with me. Jorge Cintron says, phantom braking is a serious issue with the Tesla. The autopilot in the Lucid is surprisingly good, though. It's very basic and doesn't do sharp turns, but no phantom braking. That makes sense. I think it's called Driver Plus on the Lucid, but they have pretty... Oh, you okay, MacBook? Jeez. They have a lot of cameras and a lot of sensors all being used at the same time. It took them long enough, though. I think it didn't have lane keep for like the first year it was out. But thankfully, I'm glad they have it now. But I will say, since I got rid of full self-driving, autopilot hasn't had any phantom braking. I used it a ton on my trip down to Mike's house and back, and it never did it. It was fine. So I think there's something with the navigate on autopilot version of autopilot, because you're saying you didn't have any phantom braking with basic autopilot, and I haven't had any phantom braking with basic autopilot, but I have had it with enhanced autopilot. I don't know if the way the code works makes it more likely, but that's what I noticed. I don't mind making my own lane changes, but it would be nice to be able to catch up on social media while driving. Yeah, that too, or just watch a movie or something. You got this nice display here. I've watched a lot of TV in this car with my wife, and we'll go somewhere, when we're on a trip or just when we want to get out of the house, and these seats are super comfortable. We'll just recline them, we'll lean them back and put on Frasier and just watch Frasier on the Tesla screen, and the sound system's good, and the seats are heated, and it's nice. And if we could do that while the car was in motion, maybe not recline the seats for safety reasons, but yeah, it would be great to be able to go on your phone. I would say that feature would be a lot easier for people to justify paying 15 grand for. Right now, it's like pay 15 grand for the potential of maybe getting invited on a beta program, and that beta program you still have to pay attention, and it honestly probably takes more mental space to watch what the car's doing and potentially have to get involved mid-turn with FSD beta turned on. But if it actually wasn't a testing thing, it wasn't a beta program, but it was a feature, pay this amount and you can go on your phone while the car's in motion. That I could see people justifying. Like, that's pretty freaking cool. And I'm pretty sure whenever that day comes, Tesla will pretty much be the only vehicle on the market that can offer it at that scale. I know that there's I think it's Mercedes or someone in Europe had a level 3 driver system, but it was so insanely specific that it would never be activated. It was like, in order for you to not pay attention while the car's in motion, you have to be under 25 miles an hour in traffic on a pre-mapped highway with good weather. There's all these things that had to align. And it was like, okay, so that basically almost never happens. But if it was just like any major highway, you could not pay attention. That would be cool. We'll take it on a road trip to San Diego on 405 and then 5, and I will report more. Yeah, I'm just saying from my own experience, I haven't noticed phantom braking on basic autopilot, which is weird. Could you show us how the chimney fire mode looks like in your Tesla? You mean romance mode? I guess I could, but I gotta be careful. I think I'm gonna get a lot darker in here if I turn it on. Whoa. Noises. But yes, it's beautiful. Just beautiful. Oh, there's a green line at the bottom here. The video they used for the fire is not very clean. But yeah, I have used this a handful of times, honestly. It's nice. Ooh, I think that was different music than last time. Uh, but yes, I think that's what you meant by chimney fire. Let's see. Wish Tesla had native players for YouTube Music, Amazon Music /Plex. Yeah, but I don't know. Ever since standard connectivity expired, I haven't really cared that much because I tend to have a bunch of stuff I want to just listen to on my phone, and it automatically connects to my phone. So I just get in the car and select it on the phone. So even if it had native streaming apps, I probably wouldn't use them. I'm good with Bluetooth. Elizabeth says, do you think Tesla cares too much about autonomous driving if it is a subscription service? I would say, heck no, it's not money. Just had it with subscriptions in general. Yeah, it's an option. They won't make you do it, which is nice. But I understand their obsession with it. I don't think they care too much. Because if you align with their mission statement, the autonomous driving future does help accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. Because, again, I don't think this is how it's going to work. I don't think they're going to crack the robotaxi code. But if they did, if I'm wrong, and they could make level 5 robotaxis, that would be so much cheaper to build and way more profitable to run, because it could make like $100,000 a year and only cost $20,000 to build, and it's going to last like 8-10 years, maybe more. So infinitely profitable, which is good for the business and the longevity of the company. But also, if you reduce the cost of transportation that drastically to now, not only do you not have to pay for gas or oil changes, but you also don't have to pay for an Uber driver, then yeah, you would probably convince a lot of people that they don't need to own a car anymore. And their logic is, if we can get one robotaxi to replace 5 gas cars, that will accelerate our transition away from the combustion engine much faster than just doing what they do now, which is they sell one EV, which hopefully replaces one gas car. Sometimes it doesn't even do that. Like, we didn't get rid of our gas car, but we did buy the Tesla. So we don't drive. We're consuming a lot less gasoline now, obviously, for our trips, but it would not, just buying new EVs that replace gas cars would not replace the combustion engine as quickly as the robotaxi would. And also, there is a lot of people dying from poor driving and distracted driving and drunk driving. Humans are not great drivers either, and we're getting worse. According to NHTSA, they say that total driving miles has decreased, but deaths have increased, which means despite the fact that we're driving less, we are getting in more fatal collisions regularly. So as a safety feature and just as a desirability feature, trying to make products that people want to buy, trying to lean into more software services is genius, because those are typically the most profitable. Services that you don't have to mass produce products or ship boxes out to people. Just software services, meaning that you flip a switch in code and you can offer someone something. That, I think, is incredibly profitable, which is why I'm still interested in FSD beta, and I'm excited for the updates, and I watch as many FSD beta videos as I can, because I still think that's a really exciting future, even if they don't achieve level 4 or level 5. I still think it would be an amazing future if I could get in my car one day, plug in a destination, and it drives me there. And all I have to do is take over occasionally if it's in a weird circumstance, like a construction zone, or the driveway is a little funky because it's partly gravel, or the parking lot we pull into is grass, and so FSD beta doesn't find a parking space very well. If I only have to intervene for 0.1% of the total drive, that is still a massive achievement. That is still an incredible feature that would separate Tesla from everybody else. Like, is any other car on the road anywhere close or even claiming that they're going to be able to have a level 3 driver assist feature? No, they're not even attempting that. They're just going for level 2. Um, so that feature alone, I think it's worth pursuing because, again, it would make the product higher in demand, which is good. You can profit a lot off of it because the hardware is already in every car, so you could just rent it as a subscription. I think in the future they may even go towards a per mile basis where at any time you can activate full self-driving, but it's just going to charge you by the mile to have that feature on rather than pay for a month at $200 or pay for a day at $20 or something. They will calibrate it. They will change the price of FSD in order to maximize the most amount of people buying it. And typically, the lower you get the price, the lower you get the number. Doesn't matter how long you have access to the feature, but the lower you get the number, the more likely it is for someone to pay for it. Well, I can't justify $15,000 or I can't justify $200 for a month, but $20 for one day? Yeah, got a lot of driving to do today. I would kind of like to be on my phone and just kind of chill while the car does the driving. Sure, I'll pay $20 for the day, even though that would equate to, if you extrapolated it out, like $600 a month. Um, so yeah, I would. I don't think they're caring too much about it, but I'd probably argue they care too much about. Uh, let's see. Is it truly much harder to paint a Tesla black or red over white? I just think it's dumb paying extra for colors. Imagine Apple charging more for a space black Pro Max compared to a silver one. No, I don't think it costs that much more, but the idea is that more similar to Apple, it doesn't cost much more to put in a 256 gig chip versus a 512 gig versus a 1 terabyte. But the margins are much higher on those options. So the concept is if you opt for different colors or different tiers that are more in demand, Tesla collects the thicker margin on those. So swapping out the iPhone 14 Pro 128 gig NAND with a 1 terabyte NAND, probably a difference of like $20, but they charge an extra like $500 because they're offsetting the profit margin. So the margin is lower on the entry level model, but it's higher on the high end model. That's how they kind of compensate for the wide range of prices. Um, let's see. Hey, it's your boy. Any Cybertruck news? I promise you, Mr. Flyboy. Of course, I will make videos and updates as soon as there's any and all Cybertruck news. There's not really anything worth mentioning. One thing that was kind of cool, I don't know if you guys caught it, but where is it? The Peterson Automotive Museum got a hold of, I guess they're going to do like a dedicated exhibit for the Cybertruck. Let me pull it up here. But this is not a production model. This is the original prototype that they unveiled back in 2019. So don't look at this as indication of what the production model will be, but they let me zoom in on this. They got a picture of the original Cybertruck prototype that I hadn't seen before of the charge port door open. And I think I can try to show you guys this. It's probably all blown out. But there's like a Tesla T next to the charge port, and it's not the normal Tesla logo. It's like a pixelated version of the logo, which was kind of cool, and I hadn't seen before. I was like, oh. But we know they've already redesigned the charge port door because they don't want the charge port door to be steel. They're going to make it built into the fender or the mud. What's it called? The wheel well. The black thing that's above the wheel well. They're going to build the charge port into there. At least that's what it is on the latest model. So I wouldn't put too much weight in it, but it was an angle of the old Cybertruck prototype I hadn't seen before. So I was just like, oh. It's kind of interesting. But that's about it. No, production-wise, feature-wise, I follow Elon like a hawk for that reason. I have to sift through a lot of crappy political tweets and a lot of annoying tweets about Twitter in order to find those Cybertruck tweets. But whenever he says something, I'll typically do a video. Have you tried CCS adapters? I don't see them on Tesla store anymore. Really? I was just looking at them the other day. But no, I haven't. There's not really any CCS charge points near me. There are several like level 2 charge stations that have J17 connectors, which I have used. I think I have that right down here. This is the only charging equipment that really came with the car. I've used it because there's a charge point location we go to that doesn't cost anything, so you can get electricity for free. The problem is electricity is so cheap that the free charging I get doesn't really save that much money. But I don't know. I just like the principle of it. So I've used this, but CCS to Tesla, no. I live in a pretty rural area. I don't know of any CCS locations nearby, and the closest one I'm aware of is further away from me than the supercharger. So the idea of spending $250 so that I can save like a couple cents per kilowatt hour, it's like I'm not gonna make my money back by buying a $200 CCS adapter. It's cheaper to just pay the higher price for the supercharging fee. Um, so no, I haven't tried them. Opinions on the Volvo reveal with LiDAR. They brought up the EX90 for me with LiDAR. That should be full self. Thoughts? I didn't hear about the LiDAR full self-driving thing. Genuinely, I don't think LiDAR is a good way to achieve full self-driving because LiDAR is basically useless in the rain. Um, and the biggest problem with solving self-driving is not 3D mapping. It is contextual awareness of your surroundings, and the best way you're going to get that is by video and having a neural net that understands what it's looking at, not knows how far away something is. If you watch the FSD beta videos, you can tell that's not the problem. It doesn't know. The problem is it doesn't know how far away something is. The problem is it doesn't know how to navigate that environment. And calibrating that algorithm is the tricky part. I have not seen Waymo or Zoox outperform FSD beta in any side-by-side comparison. Or, sorry, not Zoox, Cruise. Even though they're technically level 4, they take a lot of weird turns, and they're overly cautious on everything, whereas beta is a lot more brave, and that can get it into stupid situations. But that's just what I think the future is just a combo system where the human intervenes occasionally and the computer is able to drive most of the time. But that last 1% of driving is going to be incredibly challenging to autonomize. First time watching your EV channel. Oh, welcome, Nate. Thanks for joining. Sorry it's so dark. I'm trying to keep as many lights on as I can. I think there's more lights in this thing, but it probably doesn't matter. I love these visors, by the way. The little magnetic attachment thing is so cool. It's so clean looking. I love it. Anyway, let's see. FSD revenue profit will grow like crazy, as Eddie said. It's insane. As soon as it becomes a feature, yes, I would agree. Right now, I don't really find it that much of a feature because, okay, you can pay extra and the car will do more, but that doesn't change the fact that ultimately your hands are on the wheel and your eyes are on the road. Whether you pay nothing for autopilot and you just use the free version, or you spend $15,000, you still have to pay attention. That's why I don't think the take rate is very high. But if it became a feature of, okay, you don't have to pay attention anymore, I think a lot of people would go for it. I'm still reticent to drive my Model 3 on autopilot at night because I don't know if latest software update fixed the issue of the Model 3 keeping the high beams on at inappropriate times. No, whenever you turn on autopilot, it has to turn on auto headlights, which I agree is annoying, but you just push the left gear stalk forward and it shuts that feature off. So you can have autopilot on and have manual low versus high beams. I just try to keep it as low beams at all the time because I agree with you. The auto high beam feature sucks. It's complete garbage. At least where I live, it's always wanting, every time I'll turn on autopilot, it will want to turn on the high beams even though there's a guy coming and there's someone in front of me and I'm blinding them. But I try to turn on autopilot and then shut off the auto high beam right away. And I usually can do it. Or I just wait to turn on autopilot until no one's in front of me or a decent distance. So then I'll turn it on and you push it forward and then it shuts off auto high beam. But yeah, it is annoying. I wish you could just make it so that autopilot doesn't have to turn on auto high beam, but that it's still a mandatory thing. I've checked the autopilot settings and yeah, there's no way to turn that off, which sucks because it's really not good at auto high beam. Let's see. At least extra storage on the iPhone is useful. Me wanting black opposed to white brings no benefit other than my personal preference. Yeah, but I mean, that's all the reason for you to not get it if you don't want to. I do think that some of the paint codes do genuinely cost more. I don't think every paint color is identical in price, I mean, just go to Home Depot. Look at the price of paint there. It changes depending on which finish you want. But no, they price it based on demand. Like it's easier for them to streamline and just say, let's build a bunch of this color. So we'll buy that color in bulk because that's the free color. But if you want us to mix it up a bit for your preference, then that's going to complicate our assembly line. So we charge more for that. Apple can justify charging more for extra storage because people need it for photos. Me having a black Tesla doesn't affect the driving. It affects the production. That's the point. That helps them hit lower margin. It affects the speed at which they can ramp. It complicates things. But Apple technically used to. When they first unveiled the iPhone 7 in jet black, you could only get it in 128 gig, 256 gigs of storage. They did not offer a 32 gig jet black iPhone 7 until a year went by, and then they discounted it and they introduced a 32 gig jet black. But for the first year that the iPhone 7 was out, you had to pay a premium to get a certain color. It's the same thing. Rob Carr says hello from Australia. Hey, we've got family there. Thanks for tuning in. Like your videos. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I thought I read somewhere that the light it uses to create maps is ultra high resolution, which was proven to be far more accurate versus cameras or radar. I don't know what they do, but it's the auto high beam feature has never worked well. If another car is coming closer to me, it takes way too long to shut them off. I can shut them off way faster than the car can, which it shouldn't work that way, right? It's a computer. It should have better response time than me. But it doesn't. So I wish I could just permanently turn off auto high beam. No matter what the car is doing, I don't want auto high beam on. It's weird that you can turn auto high beam off with autopilot on, but you have to manually turn it off every time you activate autopilot, which is dumb. So that's kind of an annoying issue because it's basically like, if I try to suggest that to Tesla, if I say, hey, you should let me turn that off permanently in all circumstances, they're going to say, no, that's wrong. We need to just make auto high beam better so that you don't want to turn it off. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but you're not making it better, so I'm just going to ask you to let me turn it off. Just a little toggle in settings. I'm in autopilot settings right now, and I wish there was a little toggle that says, boom, like just no auto high beam ever. Obstacle aware acceleration. I'm not sure if that ever works. It says obstacle aware acceleration automatically limits acceleration and may apply the brakes if any obstacle is detected in front of your vehicle while driving at low speeds. Oh, okay. I don't think that's ever been activated. But my vehicle does have the Matrix headlights, which means theoretically, because it's legal in the US now, they could roll out a software update. Maybe we'll get it in the holiday update. That would be fun. They could roll out a software update where the car gets adaptive headlights and it maps out, like it basically leaves the high beams on, but if there's oncoming traffic, it leaves a hole on that where the traffic is coming. And if there's a biker or something, or not a biker, I think it just works with car. If there's a car in front of you, it will not put the high beams on them, but it'll put it around them. That's already a thing in Europe, and my car has the hardware to do that. It's just not activated. So I would love it if they turn that on later this year, which they could theoretically. So hopefully, I would love to do a video on that once it comes out. But I'm still trying to kind of time this FSD beta thing because I would love to try it out, but I don't want to subscribe to it and then be waiting for 30 days for Tesla to start adding people. Feels like 10.69.3 has been a bit of a bumpy release based on the videos I've watched of it. At least from Chris of Dirty Tesla. He was having issues with his. So it makes me wonder if they are going to start adding people again on a patch update. And should I wait till I see other people being added before I subscribe? I don't know. It's such a hard, complicated thing to time. Rob says, like to see more electric vehicles in the world. Well, that's what this whole stream started with, was Canoo, who hasn't delivered any vehicles yet. They said production is starting next week. First deliveries probably won't be for a while, but they will be. The vehicles they're building next week are for customers. It's only going to be 15. And they have barely any cash in the bank, and they're going into debt, and they're liquidating stock to stay afloat. So it's a really bad financial situation. They basically, like, Lucid has a year left of cash and some equity lines they can pull from. It's not a great situation, but I don't think they'll die. Whereas Canoo, it feels like they could go bankrupt any day now. And I hope that they have enough faith from equity lines and from loans and people that are willing to cut them a check to get the job done. And I think Tony's premise with Canoo right now and signing all of these binding contracts is he thinks that if we show that there's $2 billion worth of revenue, then bankers and investment groups will be willing to loan us money because they'll understand, okay, they have a clear path towards money coming back. Like, they've got infrastructure, they've got products, they've got demand. We just need to give them the money to start production, and then they can pay us back. But still, even if they ramp production, they're not going to be in a great financial situation. But I like the vehicle, so I'm really hopeful because I don't want them to go under. Jasmine says, did you struggle on tech/EV finding your editing style and set design? Do you find yourself copying unintentionally other YouTubers at first before finding out what worked for you? I don't even think I would say unintentionally. It's not bad necessarily to take inspiration. I think what I always recommend to other content creators is to make content that you want to see. And typically, any YouTuber you watch, you're going to find, like, well, I like this one thing he does, but I don't like this other thing he does. Or I like the style, but I don't like the delivery, or I don't like the opinion. So from my view, I don't think people were coming to my channels because of my editing expertise or my camera work. And I knew that I was never very passionate about cameras or angles or B-roll or any of that stuff. I was like, people are going to stay with my channel because of my opinions on things, because that's unique to me. So if you're trying to find something that's unique to you, that separates you from other channels, then maybe it doesn't have to be an editing style that is unique to you, or it doesn't have to be a certain background. I feel like you're probably getting a little hung up on things that aren't ultimately that important, because there's only so many ways you can film a product. There's only so many backgrounds you can come up with. There's only so many production value techniques you can come up with cameras and mics and lighting. And YouTube has grown so much. It's such a huge platform. There's over 2.5 billion now. 2.5 billion monthly active users. When there's that many viewers and that many creators, there's only so many different ways you can present a high production value footage of a car. So that all starts to blur together. Even channels that film with pretty high quality start to blur with other channels because it's ultimately the same car that someone else is already reviewing. So finding a unique way to deliver your opinion, whether that's a more comedic route or, for me, I have always been trying to make tech and EV videos that I wanted to see, which is like rich filled commentary. So like, I like it when someone shares a lot of their opinion on something and can go in depth on a subject, not just kind of skim the highlights. Here's the news. Canoo announcing production next month. Financials don't look very good though. They announced the factory. Anyway, that's it. Have a good day. You know, like, I don't like channels that basically just read the headline. Some people like that. Some people just want another person to read the news for them. And there are channels that basically just skim articles, read headlines, and that's the news. And that works for them. And they found an audience for it, and that's fine. But if that's what you want to see and you make it, and other people that are like-minded and also want to see that watch you, then great. But for me, I was like, I want to dive into the speculation, because that's the most fun part for me, is wondering what someone's going to do, weighing out what makes the most sense, what's the most practical solution to a problem, and suggesting things. Here's what I think they should do, or here's what I think they could do. To me, the speculation is probably the most fun part of diving into the news. And that's when you really get to dive deep onto someone's psyche, what they believe in, why they think the way they do. And then the jump cuts and the editing style I have is just to be the most time efficient with it. You can hear a lot of my thoughts and a lot of my opinions all crammed into a 10-minute video. So even though the video is still pretty long, you know, compared to a TikTok or a YouTube short, it's a 10-minute video, but you're watching it, and because all the news is being presented and all the thoughts or speculation is all diving in these different routes, you feel like, wow, I just read like a 10-paragraph article. You feel like you got a lot of information in not that much time. That's what I prefer. I don't really love short form content that much, at least for complex topics like tech and EV. But I also understand some people like longer form, some people, and I feel like this is a good middle ground to do edited videos. Live streams are good for people that want to have something on in the background, just kind of while they're doing homework or other things, they want to listen to someone dive into a subject. Um, so yeah, I'm sure everybody struggles to kind of find their style, find what they like. It just takes time though. It's natural to struggle with that, figure out what you want. What do you want to make? Um, that's what you really should be asking. What do you want to see? What's what do you think's missing that you're trying to add to? Um, let's see. Zuck should pick up Canoo when it's time to bail on the metaverse. Oh God. Please don't let Meta buy anything else. Can't Meta just die? They've bought up enough companies as is. What are your thoughts on Rivian versus Tesla? That's a big question. What do you mean, Mike, specifically? I don't think they compete very much at all. I don't think there's much overlap between those markets. Rivian's going for adventurous outdoor off-roading vehicles. Tesla's going for mass production volume, like deliveries of the most widely addressable vehicles possible. So they're just trying to check as many boxes as they can with a sedan, with a crossover, eventually a truck. Get more specific than that. Because I love Rivian and I love Tesla, but what are you putting them up against? Which vehicle's better? Depends on the use case. It's like asking, is a hammer better than a saw? It's like, well, what are you doing? There's some situations where the Rivian is better and others where the Tesla is better. For me and my lifestyle, the Tesla made far more sense and was far more affordable, and I'm still convinced I'd be much happier with this car than I would be if I bought a Rivian. As cool as the Rivian is, it just doesn't really suit my needs, and I'd have a lot less money than I do right now if I bought a Rivian. I saw 2 rare Rivians on the drive home today. One Red Canyon and one custom black matte R12. Ooh, those are like my 2 favorite color combos. It's like a matte black Rivian. Red Canyon I love. That's a beautiful color. Doesn't Canoo have a mega deal with Walmart, King Bee Zebra, and in talks with many others? Yes, they do. They signed a contract with them and also have binding orders, which means that as long as Canoo is able to build them, those companies have to buy them. It seems like the market is responding somewhat positively to the earnings call. Because the earnings call dropped after hours. Canoo is up 5% after market close, which Canoo's been hammered lately. So, I mean, yeah, today they're down 10%, so it doesn't really matter. But I understand why. The financials are not great for Canoo in the first place. Zuck buying Canoo would be the saddest day ever. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be sad if they got the vehicle to market. I would just be sad that it was through. At what cost, You stopped doing Apple Sheep Reacts / Overdrive because comments would get toxic. Would you consider doing an EV version called Tesla Bot Overdrives when companies do simple things so terribly wrong? I think a lot of people that have asked me to do rants or overdrives miss the reason you like them so much isn't because I'm angry or because I'm ranting. It's because I found something that is rant worthy. I found something that's really frustrating and annoying. So I'm ranting on it. But I need to find something that is rant-worthy or annoying. And if I can't find something, it's not just like I wake up and go, I should do a rant video today. What can I rant about? It's like something has to be rant-worthy in order to make a rant or an overdrive, because that's what inspires those. It's like really, really poor decision-making or really, really bad products or services that incentivizes me to, oh man, I have so many issues with this. I'm going to dive into why it's so bad. And that's how. Rivian truck versus Cybertruck, charging less convenient for Rivian. Yeah, there's pros and cons. I think the Cybertruck's going to cost a lot more than the Rivian. The Rivian's getting an adventure network slowly, so it may not be a great advantage now, but over time, the Rivian will have more first-party exclusive chargers that charge quick and have plug-and charge and have pull-through stalls. Cybertruck, I still think is going to be kind of cumbersome to charge. It will probably be better than most EV trucks because it'll have supercharger access, but um, still, most of the superchargers I've been to, you can tell they were definitely optimized for sedans and crossovers. The stalls are not very wide. The cars are pretty tightly close together. So once you start trying to park these big, massive Cybertrucks at superchargers, it's going to feel tight. It's going to feel kind of cluttered, and you're going to have to back in all the way to get the cable to reach, and the cables oftentimes aren't very long, so you got to back up as much as you can. So, yeah, I do think the Cybertruck will be easier to charge on a road trip, but Rivian has its own set of pros. Like they're going to cost, they already cost less in my view, and they exist. There's going to be less of a wait time on the Rivian than the Cybertruck, and Rivian has the gear tunnel. Rivian has a full steering wheel in case you want, if that's important to you. Rivian has a powered frunk. I don't think the Cybertruck will have one. It could, but yeah, there's all kinds of advantages with the Cybertruck, of course. The quad motor acceleration will probably beat the Rivian because it's a Tesla designed powertrain. Rivian outsources powertrain production. They don't design their own motors. Tesla will have a much more durable exterior with the steel and the armored glass. The software will probably be more snappy and responsive. The autonomous driving features will be better on the Tesla. It's all personal preference thing, just whatever fits your use case best. Rob Van says, for the Rivian versus Tesla question, wife is swapping in the Model Y for the R1S in Q2 next year. Wow, congratulations. Driving comfort has been a big issue for her, and the air suspension of the Rivian should be fantastic. Have you heard anything about Cybertruck keeping or dropping that? As far as I'm aware, the Cybertruck's still going to have adaptive air suspension, which makes the most sense to me. But yeah, I'm happy you're getting an R1S. I hope you like it. I've heard decent things about the suspension, and there's a lot of different driving modes you can switch between on the R1S. So yeah, that's exciting. For that use case, I would say yes, the R1S is a better vehicle, but you know, it also costs more. And the charging network is going to be probably your biggest compromise going with an R1S. Electrify America has been very spotty lately. A lot of people complaining, especially I've seen a lot of Rivian owners that get their truck and they love it, but then they take it on a road trip and it's like, oh God, this charge network is crap. The charging stations say they're working when they're not, or you have to plug in on one and it doesn't work, so you got to move to a different one. I've never had to do that with any supercharger. And just in generally speaking, most people who review Teslas and then switch to Rivians are very quick to bring up how much worse the charging network is. Isn't Tesla opening its network to all cars next year with funding they're getting from Congress? They are, but not the way you think. They're opening up new V4 superchargers that will have CCS connectors that can charge non-Teslas. That does not mean that every single supercharger will now charge all non-Teslas. That would be a nightmare, by the way. You would not want that. As much as it sounds simple, why don't they just open it up and then we can all charge there? The cables are not long enough. Most non-Teslas put the charge port in a different place, which means that to charge your Rivian at a typical average supercharger, you would have to park in the stall next to the supercharger for the cable to reach, in which case your Rivian is taking up 2 charge stalls. So now the person who, you parked in a parking space, so you're preventing that charger from working, and you're taking the cable from the nearby charger, so that's not working. It would just be a big headache. The cables wouldn't reach very well. So that if they're going to make they've approved this and they've permitted the plans for it. They've already started working on them. They are building superchargers that will have CCS connectors, but none of them are out yet. So it's going to be like starting from the ground up, essentially. It's not really that much different from Rivian having their own adventure network. It's like now Tesla will also start helping, but they're basically starting from scratch. It's not like every supercharger is going to charge a Rivian now. Nightmare, agree, its network is killer. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Let's see. A little late on the draw, but the Aptera could be the apartment dweller's vehicle if they drive less than range than they can get from the solar and have a sunny parking spot. I agree. That's another great perk of the Aptera. All kinds of use cases and advantages open up when the car can charge itself. Love Aptera. Absolutely big fan. And I want to dive more into Aptera content, so stay tuned for that because I've got a big list of Aptera videos I want to make. But yeah, I think they're, for me at least, the most exciting EV startup right now, that's yet to deliver. It said that Apple and Tesla didn't get along. It said that Cook and Musk don't get along, but Cook is all about tech and the environment, so what do you think are the chances Cook owns a Tesla? I think we'd probably know about it by now. If he did, it would have been spotted, but um, I think Cook owns like a. I thought I read an article about that or something. Probably a much more luxurious vehicle like a Mercedes or a BMW. Honestly, Tim Cook probably has someone drive him around. It doesn't really matter what car he owns. Um, but no, I think I would buy a Rivian before a Cybertruck at this point because it would just be the cheaper option. And I love the Rivian. When I got to check one out, it was really fun. Um, I like the design. I like the practicality of it. I like the size, honestly, too. I've driven a lot of big pickup trucks in my life, and I'm never that big a fan of the visibility and the navigating in a tight parking space. Frankly, my biggest concern with the Aptera is the width of the wheels. It's a very wide vehicle, so that makes me a little paranoid about how hard it'll be to park in certain circumstances, but we'll see when that time comes. But the Cybertruck is closer to the size of an F-150, and I've driven F-150s, and I don't really care for that size. Maybe the Cybertruck will make it easier because of the cameras, and hopefully the occupancy network will do a good job replicating park assist and stuff, but yeah, I prefer smaller vehicles. I find them easier to navigate, and I don't feel like I'm going to crush something. Um, Still thinking the Cybertruck is going to be mega expensive. I don't understand people that think it's going to be affordable. That's what I can't wrap my head around. Like, it just doesn't make sense. The Cybertruck, Elon has described as being their best product. He says it's going to be the best product they've ever made, and you think they're going to make it cheaper than the Model S? Even though it has more motors, more complicated engineering, bigger tires, rear wheel steering, vault, armored glass, bigger battery pack, bigger everything, basically. It's just an overall larger vehicle, more mass to it. With the exoskeleton and everything, you think all of these additions and all of these advantages, and it's going to cost less than a Model S? Like, no way. I can't believe that. What Tesla bases prices on is demand. And what Rivian and Ford have taught us is that there is an insane amount of demand for electric pickup trucks. And there is still yet to be a single electric pickup truck on the market that can supercharge. That is one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, that Tesla has such an insane lead in the demand scheme. The reason that Teslas are so expensive and they're still super backordered is because of that supercharging access. So just the fact that it's a truck that can supercharge gives it a severe advantage on the Rivian and F-150 Lightning, which are already selling for six figures. You go second hand, people are paying big bucks for those trucks. Big bucks for those trucks. People want electric trucks, and knowing that there'd be one that's extremely durable, much more iconic, from the largest EV maker in the world with the better software, better autonomous driving features, bigger bed, more durability, better turn radius and all that, and it has supercharging access. I feel like they could easily get away with charging $120,000 a truck. Hopefully it's less than that, but there's still people online that are like, oh, I think it'll be 80,000. I think it'll be 70,000. I'm like, really? You think it'll be $40,000 less than a Model S, despite being so much more complicated to build and needing way more cells and having all of this intricate redesign of everything? I don't think they're going to do a 500-mile range model for a long time, to be honest. Let's see. What are your thoughts about the conservative argument that electric vehicles still use fossil fuels via fossil fuel power plants, so they argue they're not really environmentally friendly? I don't bother arguing with those people because that argument makes no sense. For one, do our power plants have a bunch of internal combustion engines making electricity? No. They have a power plant is optimized for creating large amounts of electricity at once because it's more efficient. The pollution is centralized and localized, and you can produce electricity a lot better that way. Also, just from the vehicle itself, not using a combustion engine, it consumes substantially less energy than a combustion engine, and because it's so efficient. There's very little energy loss going from battery to powertrain versus gasoline to motion. Um, so if gas cars were getting like 130 miles per gallon, you would have a point. You could argue maybe that it would be better. It's not any better if you're charging the car via fossil fuels, but no, like there's a reason we have the term miles per gallon equivalent. It's because this EV, if you were to convert gasoline into electricity energy wise, 1 gallon of gasoline is roughly 33 kilowatt hours or something like that. This is a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack. So it's the same amount of energy of 2 gallons of gasoline, and it can go like 250 miles with 2 gallons. So that gives it a roughly like 120, 130 miles per gallon equivalent. You're not getting that with gas cars. So even if your electricity is completely powered from fossil fuels, it is still much more efficient. There's less local pollution. And a power plant can generate electricity so much better than a combustion engine can. So it's still a win for the environment, even if it's dirty energy. But also, the grid is getting cleaner and cleaner every year that goes by. More and more people deploying solar. I can attest that my electricity comes from solar. It's not because I own solar, but without giving too much away, the area I'm in, I know where the electricity comes from, and I know that it is not a fossil fuel power plant. So there is a clear path to getting to a point where none of the energy your car uses comes from fossil fuels. So it's a stupid argument, and honestly, there's too many people buying. To me, it's not a real argument. I don't think people are not buying EVs because of that. I think they're trying to justify not buying an EV because they want to feel better about themselves. They see EVs that are selling well and becoming popular, and they're like, that's not actually that cool. Even if you explain that to them and show them, no, it is truly better for the environment, that's not going to convince them of anything. So don't waste your time with those people. They're not going to go, wow, I never thought of it that way. I better buy an EV now. They'll think of something else. They'll be like, yeah, but the mining though, there's emissions in the mining. And it's like, yeah, because there's no emissions in oil refining either, right? It's not like it's not like oil refineries use a bunch of cobalt that you complain about being used in batteries. It's not like drilling for oil causes emissions. Oh, wait, yeah, it does. Or transporting oil to the refinery causes emissions, or refining the oil causes emissions, or transporting that gasoline from the refinery to the gas pump causes emissions, or that the gas station uses electricity, which is also dirty for the grid, I guess, where you are. Ugh, no, those people are not worth your time. Too much competition for the Cybertruck? It's like not enough. There's 2 vehicles it's competing against, basically. The Dove C coming up. Will you be watching rooting for the U.S.? No, I don't even know what that is, Hasael. I'm sorry. I'm not into sports. Jorge says, I cannot wait for Cybertruck, but we'll hold out for the 500 plus mile range model. It'll work out great. Also, since it takes about a year to work out all the bugs / issues, I'm patient and can wait. Okay, good, because I think you'll be waiting. I think you're going to be waiting a while. I have a belief that the 500-mile range Cybertruck is going to get way pushed out. I don't think it's going to be a year-long wait. I think it's going to be like a 5-10-year-long wait. Being able to supercharge a Rivian in the coming year with the CCS-capable stalls makes Rivian more and more appealing. Thanks, Tesla. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to, I think, unlock a lot of buyers because it's probably going to be like 5 stations in the first 12 months. But if you're waiting, 5 or 10 years before you buy a Rivian, then yeah, that'll eventually, that problem will hopefully get better as time goes by. Let's see. Oh, dinner's ready. I got to wrap up, guys. When do you think all EVs would get a spare tire? It's a must-have for me. I don't think they ever will. There's just so many advantages to not having one, cargo-wise and efficiency-wise. You can buy one and just throw it in your trunk. Those exist. If it's a must for you, just buy the EV you want. You're specifically not going to buy it. You'd say there's a really good EV with great efficiency at a great price, but because it doesn't come with a $100 spare tire, you're not going to buy the whole thing. If it's that important to you, just buy one and throw it in the sub-trunk. You won't even know it's there until you need it, and then you can do it yourself. But there's a lot of reasons they don't offer spare tires. That's One of them is the efficiency. Another is that you have to mount it in very specific places. Um, yeah, Rivians come with spare tires. Some of them do, at least. When Cybertruck was announced, it was the cheapest Tesla at that moment. If Tesla can keep that price plus inflation, that would be amazing. It would be, but it's not going to happen. I'm just telling you now. The 35K Model 3 was barely a thing. The Model Y was announced to start at 39K, and it never did. There was never a time where it was 39,000. There was a brief 48-hour period where it was 40,000, but that was it. Those people aren't worth your time. Those people are my entire extended family. Just don't bother arguing with them. Find common ground on other subjects, but don't worry about, like, I gotta convince my family that EVs are good. It's like, if they hate it, they're gonna hate it. It doesn't matter what you say. Yeah, frugal Tesla guy got a spare tire for his 3. You can always buy an extra wheel from a third party, just reduces range. Yeah, and just make sure you look up how to change a spare tire on your Tesla, because it's not just like any other vehicle. You have to mount it with a specific puck in a very specific place, and it could be very dangerous if you mess up. So do some research, but yeah, if it's that important, just buy one. Too much competition is in Rivian, Ford, Chevy, GMC, Ram. Also Ram eyeing they will definitely have a 500-mile range and massive for the market all within the next year or two. Okay, there's the Ioniq 5, there's the ID4, there's the Bolt EV, there's the Bolt EUV, there's the Kia EV6. All of these things beat Tesla on price, some of them on range, but they're not outselling Tesla. I don't think you understand, like, the Rivian and the Ford F-150 Lightning makes so much more sense than the Hummer EV, but the Hummer EV still got over 60,000 reservations, and they had to shut off orders for it. We are not anywhere close to, like, oh, sorry, there's no room for the Cybertruck because everyone bought some other EV. No, there's a huge line of people that want an electric truck that can supercharge. None of the trucks you listed have supercharger access. None of them are as durable as the Cybertruck. None of them will go as fast as the Cybertruck. The Tesla will have sub 3 second 0 to 60. It'll have the rear wheel steering, and it'll have the better software, better durability. I'm saying pickup truck, I'm saying crossover, Kia EV6, Ioniq 5. Tesla has lots of alternatives. That hasn't diminished the demand. There's actually more alternatives to Tesla now than ever before, and yet the demand is still insanely high. So there being pickup trucks alternative doesn't stop the fact that there's a big group of people that want to buy the Cybertruck. Just because there's a different vehicle there's a bunch of people that have bought Rivians that are planning to sell them for Cybertrucks when the Cybertruck's ready. I see a big thread on that in subreddits that are like, I love my Rivian, can't wait to get the Cybertruck though. Like, they'll buy whatever the latest thing is. There's a bunch of people that are gonna buy both. What's to your comment about the Cybertruck and its competition? I know, that was my example, is like, just because there are cheaper alternatives to Teslas hasn't stopped people from buying them. Same thing. But anyway, I got to get going. Thank you all for tuning in, and I appreciate you guys watching, and I've got more videos to come, so hope you guys had an excellent stream. I always have fun with these. This is always a highlight of my week. But stay tuned for more stuff. Have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.